So thank you so much again for this session. I welcome you. I am Harsha Kotta Rajendra Prasad. Having said, the agenda for today's session is we speak about Dynamics 365 and the recent changes that has come along with the solution, wherein license enforcement, right? So though it is a very simple terminology, it goes deep into roots, and we have seen a lot of customers ask us how we can solve this problem, and so we just wanted to share our experiences that we had got in terms of exchanging various ideas in terms of how the current day challenge of license enforcement can be tackled, and how an archival solution can be a pivotal part of your enterprise applications, along with all your operational applications, and probably certain things that we have learned in the past we'll also try to touch upon. And that's all about that we are going to talk about today. And feel free to drop your questions at any point in time. We will try to address them then and there. If not, probably we will park for the very end, and then we will try to address as much as possible. All right, so moving along. So the current challenge that we are talking about, Dynamics 365, and why enterprises and organizations are evaluating their D365 environments, right? So basically, the license model that was available earlier for Dynamics 365 has been slightly changed, and this is triggering a wave of organizations to think how this can be tackled. So the earlier model of licensing was fully audit based. So people were free to use any module freely, though in many cases there were users who had full access, but they were using only certain part of those access that they would really want to do and carry out their day-to-day operations. But having the change in a license enforcement, active license enforcement, what that means is organizations have to adapt to the new approach of licensing, where instead of right to audit, now that D365 cuts down the access based on the true license entitlement, right? So what that means is the operations that we carry out day to day across D365, across any of the modules, right? So they need to be revisited. And it also mandates that we are up to date with the roles and the access levels that are available to the user groups, right? So that is what we are trying to solve, at least for today. And we will probably dive a little deeper. So we first probably talk about what are the things that probably are the use cases. Right? So in fact, when we have a D365 installation, the historical things or a common pattern of data retrieval that we have seen so far is one could be looking up their historical invoices, like the invoices that were generated sometime back, or any backdated invoices, and they would probably want to view those invoices for various reasons, for cross-reference, or to check the validity of the invoices and things like that. And in certain cases, these data lookups can probably cut across different financial periods, right? So we just closed our financial year 2025 and 26, and now that we are into the next financial year 26 and 27, there could be multiple areas where we would probably want to have a look at our ledgers, probably some payments or probably some receipts, and try to see if all our data is intact and we are carrying over the fresh balances to the current year and whatnot, right? So be it stocks or be it whatever with respect to any type of industry that you represent, right? And so certain cases, there could be data needs that could probably cut across certain projects which are already completed and probably closed engagements, right? So those can be certain uses and certain procurement history records, right? So in certain industries where the historical data is very important in terms of procurement. Now that because of all the geopolitical situations, the procurement teams get a lot of burden as the purchase patterns keep changing, right? So the raw materials that were purchased at X price no more stay in the same X price, right? So because of all the various factors that are influencing the cost dynamics, makes purchase history lookups more relevant. And finally, one key thing is to also have data lookup for various audit and compliance purposes, right? So certain financial transactions for the last 3 years, let's say if we are probably approaching for a loan, people could ask us for trial balances for the last 3 years, or profit and loss P&L accounts for the past 3 years and whatnot, right? So those kind of audit and compliance records probably would need us to go back and start looking at historical records, invoices, and whatever items that were part of Dynamics 365, right? So this could be certain status where a potential use case for Dynamics 365 could probably begin, right? So these are various ways where the data retrieval from any Dynamics 365 will still be required, right? So now having talked about this, and this is a problem that we are talking about and on as an ongoing activity, right? So it's not going to stop with this financial year or with this particular day of the year or month. What we will be carrying is historical data growth, right? So that level of data as and when we are adopting ourselves to this kind of systems, cloud-based systems, where we keep encountering and keep adding a lot of daily transactional data, the volume of data is supposed, and it is going to be doubling, if not tripling, or at times it can have an exponential growth, right? So, and when this happens, again, the key challenges that could probably come into picture is how we maintain the accessibility of this data, the ongoing growth of data, and how do we govern the data, and how do we control access on who sees what type of data, and how do we restrict what type of data, and how do we bring in the compliance factors, right? So with ever changing regulatory compliances, one of the new upcoming or ongoing compliance requirements with respect to PDPA, or with any of those geography based or any type of compliance requirements, keep adding to the burn, right? So we will need to plan and make efficient structures so that we are able to manage the data growth. And one of the key factors that I am actually talking at the last, but has the major impact on all these moving parts, is the cost, right? So everybody would probably would want to spend less based on the technological advancements, the adaptations, and things like that. So then what that mandates is we have a balancing act where we are managing all these four pillars intact with any of our data growth that becomes inevitable with D365 and any type of operational systems. All right, so data growth need to be governed so that we have cost in effect. I mean, whatever cost we incur can be reduced, and we also reduce the spread of compliance risk, right? So that is what we probably are depicting here. So now that we are talking about an operational system and a system that is used across different verticals, and how we are also tackling the data growth while we are trying to do a balancing act in terms of growing data versus how we manage to reduce our cost, right? So while we talk about these topics, these are very much essential and needs a lot of attention, right? So not all the data has the same purpose, right? So we were talking about how we need to probably segregate active data versus non-active data predominantly. So when we call out active data, any data that is pertaining to any type of daily transactional activities or any open transactions or any ongoing business activity that actually has its own life cycle, right? So we will probably need to demarcate what that part of active data could be and part of what historical data that could be, right? So we were talking about the need of referencing back our procurement records, referencing back our, for example, when we talk about any purchase trends or any type of um, uh, trends of production and whatnot, right? So we will need the historical data so that we can reference. We have a point reference where we can compare our historical data with our current data and how we will be able to catch up or what type of things can be improvised. And again, there are certain data which actually need certain compliance requirements, which mandates us to make the historical data available. And beyond that, we'll also have certain regulatory and reporting data, which we will obviously need, and have certain part of the data for our business intelligence, right? So this could be the one of the first steps that we would need to probably get started with in identifying our active data versus historical data. And that gives us a very good uh, starting point where we will be able to manage any of our activities with relevant to Dynamics 365 and the current challenges that are popping up with respect to license enforcement, right? So this again mandates us to have a smarter approach in segregating our active versus historical data and how we are able to keep this approach enforced within our applications and how we always keep our active data separate and manage that separate with respect to managing any historical data. So it is a very simple aspect. There is no secret about any of these activities, right? So any historical data or any business complete information would satisfy the need for having them called as historical data, right? So any closed invoices, any payments that are already complete, any historical, let's say, employee payment records or any type of pay slips, right? All those kind of data, which actually once generated, will not have any effect of ongoing operational activity, right? So that type of segregation is what we would want to probably take into account, which will help us to separate what is active versus what is historical, right? So that is the first steps or the building blocks. And coming back to the Dynamics 365 use case, we want to dive one level deeper and explain how this actually can be done based out of our experience that we have done and worked with our clients in the past. So this is the proven framework that would probably work with any of D365 instances. I hope the slide is visible. So yeah, basically, this could be a 6 to 8 week span of activity that will give us a very good understanding of how much can be saved with respect to licensing models versus archive data versus how our data gets readily be accessible even post all these benefits are achieved, right? So there is an indicative timeline that we have put on each of this phase, if you want to call, right? So probably we are talking about 4 different phases on which this kind of activity can be set up. And obviously with any activity that we do, the first thing that we will probably do is discovery. And in the world of archival, what we probably would call that out as data mapping. So here is where we completely take a stock of the data, right? So kind of capturing an inventory of what type of data sets that we have, what type of requirements are need to be catered with respect to managing the life cycle of the data itself, and how we are able to model the data that are sitting across different modules, and how we are able to see how our storage costs are spread across as of today, and how we are able to attach any type of regulatory framework to the data that we have, right? So probably at the end of this phase of discovery, we will have or probably would have arrived at a data map, which actually allows us to understand how the data flowed, what type of data is, um, to refer back to our previous slide, active versus historical, right? So those kind of details can be inferred, and that could help us to take this inference to the next set of activities, right? So the next phase would technically be the configuration, like how do we set up what we had inferred in the phase one, how do we carry that learnings into the next phases, and how we are able to bring the data from the system, how do we prioritize the data, how do we set up what goes first versus what goes next. And at the end of this phase, probably we will have a baseline of what has a typical way of how much of data that we can be offloading from the system, right? And ideally, the next phase is going to be the validation, just that whatever we have done so far is apt and there is no data losses, or and all the data lineage is fully maintained, and we have various methods in terms of validating what we have done is accurate. And once at the end of this phase, we will probably have a complete validation ensuring that none of the blocks that we have built is broken and everything is still intact, and we are able to safely and securely carry over all the data that is needed, and also have the next set of production rollout plans, right? So basically that will be the final phase 4, where we will run this cycle of extracting active versus historical data through setting up automated pipelines or automated pipes, basically, so that we can automate this process end to end on your different various business processes, and which allows us to tackle by reducing the data footprint on the source system, effectively managing the licenses, by kind of spreading the historical data out of the operational system and allowing only the main use case of the system to go and do its own talk, and keep all the historical data in the relevant archive, so that we are able to get the data from both the operational system and also the archive at any point in time and for any type of use case. All right, to quickly summarize, so what we are talking about here is a phased approach on how we deal with our current challenges with respect to D365, with respect to license enforcement, and how we are able to slice and dice, right, if you want to call it in simple terms, with a phased approach and get the data that is relevant and what is active versus what is historical, right? So now that we have spoken about the methods, so every data that
So,
has, yeah.
sorry to interrupt. There's a question in the chat box.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let
So,
me
what's
see.
the typical reduction in storage or licensing cost after archiving historical data?
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, this is one of the most common questions that any of our customer or potential customer ask us. What do I get with respect to benefits? What do I get with respect to TCO? You are asking me to do some changes to the flow of patterns of operations that I am following today. What is my benefit, right? So, of course, the benefit is always there. To quantify what type of benefit can be achieved depends upon what type of system that we are planning to handle, right? So that is what I would probably give you as an 10,000 feet answer. But by looking at our um, um, historical records that we have worked with our customers, we can easily reduce down anywhere between 20 to 50 percentage of your cost, just that by adopting best practices in terms of managing the archive, in terms of managing the life cycle of the data. All right, and that is in terms of cost, right? And Okay, I see one another question. How do you determine? So let me come to that. So basically, there could be multiple folds of benefits. The one is reduction in cost and storage of the current system. The second thing is reducing the license, right? So the third is simplifying your infrastructure requirements. And one of the major important benefit is you can extend the archival solution to different types of systems. So you are not just creating a homogeneous archival or a point in time solution for your archival requirement. One of the key benefits is you will be able to extend the archival solution to different types of systems, which I'll probably talk about in one of the upcoming slides. Hope that answers. So I see one another question. How do you determine which data is safe to archive without impacting business processes? All right, this is also a very valid question where again we are talking about slicing and dicing the data and things like that. So one of the key things that we always take into account is during the phase one, where we relentlessly understand the active data versus historical data, right? So once we have that demarcation, which doesn't come automatically, it does need certain part of understanding of the system, the complexity of the probably what do I term, right? The customizations that the system has taken, right? So those kind of factors need to be accounted. And once we have an understanding of that, there is always a way that we are able to um, without getting a negative impact, we are able to segregate the data and the process, and we are able to segregate all the historical data without even changing any of the day-to-day activities, right? And that way, we ensure that the data that we are bringing out is always safe and nothing breaks anywhere. We also always maintain all the referential integrity. We do take care of all the data structures, right? So those kind of things, checks and sums. So there are a lot of inbuilt ability that we will also be able to leverage, which will help us to ensure that we are not losing any part of the data at any point in time. Right? Okay, hope that answers your question. Let me get back to the presentation. So, so now that we are talking about how we are able to set up this with the D365 environment, right? So basically, we take a phased approach, like I was explaining in the previous set of slides, on how we can exactly do this, right? So basically, we should think about maintaining the life cycle of the data with the D365 application, how we are able to keep the operational data as such, and how we are able to keep the historical data, how we are able to manage the life cycle of the historical data is probably going to be the most effective way of looking at the solution, right? So anywhere, whenever we speak about these kind of solutions, the one thing that we always want to keep is uh, we need to set up a process which is always repeatable, right? So it is not just that we are catering to one problem for one point in time, but we do a repeatable process so that the process can be repeated and can be taken across to different parts of the organization, right? So again, there is a simple depiction here. So we create, we process. Once we complete, we retain, right? So once we retain for certain time, we manage the life cycle of the data by offloading the data as well, so that always we have the right amount of data that we have in the archive, and we also have the right amount of data for the operational activity, right? So, so now probably we talk about a little deeper on why we spoke about how D365 is coming into picture and how archival is probably helping us to solve a lot of problems. So once the data is archived, right? So these are the things that we'll also be able to achieve. So always the idea is not just to archive and forget, right? So it is always like you archive the data and you still make all the data that is archived be available for any type of historical retention or historical retrieval. Kindly excuse me. I'll be back in 5 seconds. Sorry, I am back. So we are talking about how data archival can be beneficial in terms of how we are able to not just archive the data, but also bring back the data whenever needed. And when we do this, one of the some of the key features that we also need to maintain is retaining all the historical information, right? So I was talking about how we safely need to archive the data, not just breaking any of the process, right? But we also need to preserve the business context, right? So we need to understand how those data was related with each other and things like that, so that we are able to maintain the data well in the future state. And how we are able to meet the compliance requirements, right? So there are various regulatory and compliance requirements, and again, each of this requirement can be different for different audiences, right? So finance and operations versus people versus manufacturing, right? So there could be various compliance requirements that could be coming into effect with different type of data sets. And one of the key thing is how are we able to maintain the user access, right? I was talking about it's not just we will archive the data and leave it, but we also would want to get back the data whenever needed and provide it to users for various activities, right? So when we talk about long-term preservation of data, we talk about archival and sustaining the data strategy, right? So basically what that means is we are not just focusing for today's requirement, but we are also thinking for tomorrow, where we are able to manage the data in terms of not only the intake process, but also the offload process and everything in between, right? So how we maintain the user access, how we are able to uh, clearly demarcate roles, we clearly demarcate who gets what type of access to data. Since we have dealt with a lot of data sets that are very sensitive, right? So basically, lot of personal information which requires utmost care. And while we are talking about these information, they also bring in the regulatory requirements and things like that, right? So with all these into consideration and thinking about a long-term strategy for archival, there are very simple few steps that we will need to align. With that, we will be able to create a sustainable data strategy, which will create a archival factory, if you want to call. So, like I was trying to portray, so archival is not just storing or putting the data into one storage and forgetting about it. Archival is a well-tailored framework which actually manages information more intelligently and also helps us to manage the life cycle of the data itself. So these are certain things that we have realized that certain Dynamics 365 customers would like to have. So like I said, getting all the data being queryable, right? So kind of being ability to separate the historical data and then put it into D360 from D365 to the archival solution. And one of the key things is preserving the data and relationships, and also preserving the business context, so that we are able to retrieve the data in a more meaningful way. And we probably would need to have audit ready data, right? So it's not just you put somewhere and just forget about it, but whenever there is a need for any audit or any legal or any kind of those data retrieval requirements, you are still able to adhere to it. And we were talking about certain historical data retrieval, right? So providing user access, right? It's not just making the entire archive data dependent on certain IT teams, rather giving access to the end users so that they can easily fetch the data back from the archives whenever they would want to. Um, and and obviously reducing all the D365 license enforcement, so that we separate out the operations versus historical data. So what we probably would keep the goal in mind is moving away from data dependency to giving the full information accessibility, right? So always trying to give the right information to the right people right? Whenever that the need is, and also support all type of legal and compliance requirements, and reduce the overall operational dependency, right? So making it very easy to use, not a lot of activity to be performed while getting back the data. We have seen certain challenges, right? So with various customers, right? So we complete the archives, and probably after few years there is a legal requirement. Somebody from the legal team just pops into our door and asks us to give a complete purchase and payment and receipt history for particular customer, probably 5 years back, right? So those kind of tricky situations where we probably would need to get into the data, try to understand what are the data points that that particular customer had interacted with, what are his payments, receipts, and things like that, and then probably create a full view of the interactions that he had with that particular customer and the system, and then probably create that as a report and then give it to the requester of that report, right? So these kind of common use cases we have seen, which actually is very painful if you don't have a proper archival strategy in place, which actually has very simple things like that, what I was discussing on preserving the business context, preserving the metadata, and also having insights of what type of data we have archived, right? So those kind of things will help when we are talking about data dependency, right? So again, key features that we are talking about any historical managing historical data is we do not want to compromise any accessibility of the data. Data is always available from the archive then and there whenever needed, and maintaining secure access, right? One of the key aspects. So still maintaining all the roles, access privileges, and things like that within the archive, and also always be very compliant, meet all the regulatory requirements with respect to handling PII, PHI type of data. And this will reduce our dependency on the production systems while we move our data retrieval requirements on the historical records into the archive, and which also enables quick and fast and reliable search mechanism without hampering any license needs, and also allowing the operational system to also operate in much better fashion. All right, so to tackle all these challenges, here is where we probably would talk about the solution that we have about Archon. So basically, we will be able to set up our Archon suite of products to manage all the historical data that gets piled up over a period of time with D365. And we will be able to preserve all the information, historical data, and we'll also be able to set up a very strategic long-term data preservation policies. By that, we will also be able to manage the life cycle of the data itself. All right. So now to talk about a little more on the product suite, very high level. So there are 3 different products purpose built for solving any type of archival requirements: Archon Analyzer, Archon ETL, and Archon Data Store. So these 3 products can work hand in hand and also can help organizations individually so that they are able to reduce their runway, complete their data archival goals in a much quicker fashion. All right, so that is a very high level introduction about our product offering, and probably I will spend some time on this particular depiction on how all the product suite come into picture in in an enterprise archival situation. So Archon Analyzer on the top left, you will be able to see where that particular tool will help us to catalog the data, right? So what I mean by catalog is to collect maximum possible information about the data that we are talking about, right? So we were talking and touching about certain aspects of the data which qualifies the data to be either called as operational versus historic, right? So these kind of segregation of the data can be easily done with help of the Archon analyzer, which analyzes all the data sets, all the source system, and create a complete catalog of the data, and also gives a lot of classification capabilities with respect to either sensitivity or either type of the data, either based upon the age of the data, and in various streams, right? So all these metadata aspects will help us to take informed decisions and take the data from the source system and then pass it on to the Archon data store, which will be the final resting place for the data that is spoken about for data archive, right? So the next one on the left side, on the bottom part, you can see Archon ETL. So we use our ETL aspect, our own in-house built, purpose-built ETL tool, which solves, which acts as a bridge from the source system to the target, wherein we have a lot of automation brought in, a lot of knowledge built in, wherein we'll be able to leverage pre-existing connectors to pull the data and fetch the data from the source system and park the data into archival platform, which is Archon Data Store. So having said that, we also have Dynamics 365 connector, which exactly helps us to fasten our route, fast track our extraction and ingestion process, so that we are able to achieve the archival in a way much shorter time frame. All right. And now we are moving to the center part of the slide, which is Archon Data Store, which is the hero product where all the data that is archived from different systems, including Dynamics 365, can be put in, which actually supports any type of archival, structured, unstructured, semi-structured, any type of data. Basically, we will be able to archive all types of data and then put everything into one single enterprise-wide archival platform, and then leverage a lot of benefits with respect to whatever we discussed. Whatever true archival solution should possess will all be available, right? So like managing the life cycle of the data, so data retrieval, being able to create dashboards, being able to set up um, automatic holds, right? So there are multiple benefits that we could think about that can be leveraged in a end user perspective. And when it comes to technical perspective, these tools are built upon data lakehouse methodologies, and these are very modern and they can scale very quickly, pretty quickly, and they provide a lot of benefits when we talk about in terms of compressing the data, reducing the storage cost, in terms of tiering the data into different tiers of storage, right? So we will be able to uh, uh, categorize the data into hot, warm, and cold, set up automated age-based policies, which will push the data into different tiers of storage automatically without any human intervention, and also be able to bring back the data without any interference, right? So we will be able to seamlessly access the data that is sitting across different tiers of storage and different classifications of data sets and different geographies and whatnot, right? So those kind of a distributed architecture can be supported, and as the slide talks about, runs everywhere, right? So we have a very flexible deployment model wherein we will be able to deploy our applications on cloud, on-prem, or hybrid, right? So we have various customers asking us based upon their requirements, variety of deployments, which we are always able to cater, and always supporting our customers with their relevant organization pushes, right? So we have customers asking us to deploy in Azure at times, or on their on-premise at times, or at AWS at times, or any private cloud at times, or at times our own SaaS offering as well, right? So we are very flexible, and we are able to cater and be able to deploy our solution. We are very much agnostic to the deployment itself, right? So we are able to provide a very flexible deployment. Okay, all right. So that is pretty much about this slide. I see one question. Does archiving historical data reduce role footprint, or does license still follow the data? All right. Very valid question with respect to D365. The approach of segregating the operational data versus historical data is certainly going to help us reduce the licensing requirements, wherein uh, based upon our prior experience, we have clearly seen that not everybody needs access to all the aspects of D365. We have um, um, actually 95% of use cases leaning towards that. Probably 95%, 95 out of their 100 license does not need the full access that they are having as of today. And taking that into consideration, definitely there is a very big scope of reducing these licensing requirements, where we can reduce the licensing requirements and then offload the historic. With the combination of offloading the historical data, we will be able to uh, effectively reduce the licensing requirements and also reap more benefits while we adopt archival solutions. All right, I think I answered your question. So I think we are pretty much at the very end of the presentation for today. I just have a couple of more things to share with you folks. So we just wanted to share our presence. So we are available globally. So from the United States till Australia, we have our presence where we cater to our customers spread across different locations. And to just to showcase our client intel, right? So we do have a lot of Fortune 500 customers under our belt, for whom we have been able to successfully set up large archival factories, wherein they are able to run their own archival process. We have been able to enable them to set up that platform where they can intake the archival activity by themselves, right? So just flashing that's on the screen here. But yeah, we do have a lot of use cases with Dynamics 365, especially with F&O, and also certain supply chain management and other modules as well. And we do also have a lot of use cases across different applications and verticals as well, not just limiting to D365. We do have very good archival use cases with applications that are handling people data. For example, PeopleSoft or Workday or ADP, right? So there are multiple use cases that we have. We also have certain ERP relevant use cases that we have solved for our customers. For example, SAP, JD Edwards, Navision, and whatnot, right? So, and we also have very core offering as well with respect to certain core banking applications, Finacle, T24, and a lot of other ancillary applications around that. Certain business process management applications like Pega, NewGen, right? So we have a lot of use cases that we can keep talking about. With the interest of time, probably I would close my presentation here. And I would once again thank everybody for giving your time today and sparing around 60 minutes of your valuable time. I thank you folks once again. And we are reachable in different ways. You can reach out to us on the email address that is getting displayed on the screen. We have our website wide open where you can also reach out to us in contact section, and feel free to share your archival questions or any type of strategy discussions. It's not just about selling, right? It's more about trying to solve a problem that is inherent with different types of applications. And the expertise that we carry over by working with large enterprises, we will be more than happy to share our use cases and how we solve a particular problem on particular technology at given any point in time. And I will stop here. Thank you again. Back to you, Rasika.
Yes, Asha, there is one more question in the group. Sorry, the chat box.
All right. Yeah. So I see one another question. And since we have time, I'll probably take it. If data moves outside D365, does the user querying still need a D365 license? All right. So again, I think the way I'm looking at the questions is clearly defining that the changes that is getting enforced on the D365 side due to license enforcement is actually making people to ask all these type of questions. Definitely yes. For your question, definitely yes. There will be reduction in license, right? I would probably call it out again. There will be a reduction in license that you will probably need once you set up a defined archival strategy. While once we have segregated the operational data versus historical data, and by our various interactions with customers who are using D365, the one thing that we have inferred is there is always a chance that people have more access level than needed for their activities, right? So generally people will have full access, which is probably not needed for every aspect of D365, right? So we will definitely be able to bring a positive impact while we also have the license model in control, right? And also not compromising any of the roles and access restrictions at any point in time. All right. Yeah. Thank you for the question.